With us to present today, we have Dave and Julie Tjhio. Dave and Julie have a connection to the region, the Southeast Asia region, because of Dave's familial connection. They will be sharing photos, stories, and information from their numerous trips to Southeast Asia, including Cambodia, Indonesia, and Thailand, among others. From cuisine to historic sites, they've got us covered.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
I'm Dave, and this is Julie. So as the other Julie mentioned, we are going to talk about our various trips to Southeast Asia. So we've got a lot to cover, so we'll go ahead and get started here. The region of Southeast Asia is made up of 11 countries. We've been to several of these. I've got them listed here. You can see the ones listed in bold are the ones that we've visited to varying degrees, with the ones towards the top being the ones that we've visited most frequently over the years, down to the bottom. Our focus today is going to be on our experiences at the countries we've visited, but just to get things kicked off and to provide some background, I'm going to go through a little bit of very brief info about each of these countries. So first is Indonesia. Indonesia is an archipelago, which is a collection of islands of 17,000 islands, which makes it the largest archipelago in the world. It's made up of 270 million people, so the fourth most populous country in the world, of which about 87% are Muslim. It was a Dutch colony at one point, so Dutch settlements began in the 1600s, and Indonesia eventually became a Dutch colony. By 1945, Indonesia had proclaimed independence from the Dutch, so they've been a sovereign nation since then. Next up is Thailand. Thailand is a constitutional monarchy and parliamentary democracy. One of the interesting things about Thailand is there are over 40,000 temples. So everywhere you go, whether it's in Bangkok or out throughout the rest of Thailand, you will more than likely see temples around. There are over 400 in Bangkok alone, and about 94% of the population identifies as Buddhist. Next up is Cambodia. Cambodia gained independence from France in 1953. About 97% of Cambodians identify as Buddhist. And as you can see on the flag here, the temple Angkor Wat is featured on the Cambodian flag. So Angkor Wat is a very important symbol of the country, and we'll talk a little bit about it in our presentation here. Next up is Singapore. So Singapore is an island city-state at the southern tip of the Malay Peninsula. So if you picture the Malay Peninsula, Singapore is just this small part right here. It's basically its own little island, and it's a city-state. Modern Singapore was founded in 1819 by Sir Stamford Raffles as a trading post of the British Empire. And Singapore gained self-governance in 1959 and became an independent country in 1965. The population of Singapore is about 5.7 million, with Chinese making up about 76% of the population. Those identifying as Malay make up 15%, and then 7.5% identify as Indian. Next up is Vietnam. So Vietnam declared independence from France in September of 1945. As most of you will remember from history, there was a brutal war that happened in there that the US was involved in. In July of 1976, North and South Vietnam merged to form the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. The population of Vietnam is about 95 million, with the majority of Vietnamese identifying as not following any organized religion. Next up is Malaysia. So they declared independence from the British Empire in 1957. Ethnic Malays make up about half of Malaysia's over 32 million people. They are a constitutional monarchy, and 61% of them identify as Muslim. The Philippines are another archipelago made up of over 7,600 islands. More than 5,000 of the islands remain unnamed on most international maps. So there's quite a few, as with Indonesia, a lot of uninhabited islands. The Philippines were once a Spanish colony, which explains the next point here. They're the only Asian nation that is predominantly Christian. 86% is about 86% is Roman Catholic. and it is the 13th most populous country in the world with over 108 million people. Next up is Laos. As you can see in the map here, this is a landlocked country. It is, in fact, the only landlocked country in Southeast Asia. Every other country that we're covering has at least some land on bordering water. The majority ethnic group are the Laos, which make up 53%. It was a French colony until October of 1953, and 66% of the population identify as Buddhist. Next up is Myanmar. Myanmar has over 53 million people, 88% identify as Buddhist, and it was a British colony until 1948, when Myanmar, formerly known as Burma, gained their independence. Next up is Brunei. So Brunei gained independence from British rule in January of 1984, so fairly recently. They developed wealth from extensive petroleum and natural gas fields. They're located on the adjacent to Malaysia. And then finally, East Timor. So this is a small or small country on the eastern edge of Indonesia. They were occupied by Portugal until 1975. Independence was initially declared in November of 1975, but then they were annexed by Indonesia in July of 1976. Finally, independence was restored again in May of 2002. So as Julie mentioned, I've got some family connections in Indonesia. As a child growing up, we took a couple trips out to Indonesia, the first being in 1976 and again in 1979. My parents were born and married in Indonesia and then left in the 1960s for Germany. Then after living in Germany for a couple of years, they moved to Canada before immigrating to the US, where my sister and I were born. We have a lot of relatives there, as you can see from all the pictures that we've collected over the years. A lot of uncles, aunts, cousins from both sides. And my oldest living relative is my grandmother. She's still living in Jakarta. She's now 96 years old. This is a picture from one of our trips when we went to Bali. We've got my grandmother here in the middle with my mom, as well as my sister and her husband. This was an opportunity for us to celebrate my grandmother's 90th birthday. We had a big celebration in Jakarta, and then took a little trip to Bali as well. So just as a quick overview, these are the trips that Julie and I have taken together. So Julie's first visit to Southeast Asia was at the end of 2004. It was basically our honeymoon. We got married in November of 2004, and then took a trip to Singapore and Bangkok. Then you'll see the rest of our trips here to Southeast Asia. Primarily, since I have family in Indonesia, we tried to make Indonesia sort of a center point of our trips. So always working in a visit to family and then seeing other areas within the region that we could branch out to. So in June of 2008, we added Chiang Mai and Phuket. We also visited Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam. In May of 2009, back to Bangkok, and then also visited Yogyakarta and Bali. In April of 2013, we went to Jakarta and Bali, as well as Cambodia. And then January of 2015, again, back to Jakarta and Bali. And then our latest trip was back to Jakarta in August of 2019. That also happened to coincide with the trip we took to Japan. So we're going to give an overview of kind of our experiences here, just to give you a little flavor of what we've experienced and some of the things that we really enjoyed about visiting the region. So to kick things off, I'm going to talk about some attractions and activities in the region that we experienced. This picture, before I move on, is a view of the Chao Phraya River in Bangkok. So this is a view from the hotel that we stayed at, and you can see it's a very big river, and serves as a major waterway for the area. So to kick things off, I'm going to start in Bangkok. Wat Pho is the the temple where the what's known as the reclining Buddha is kept. And so here's a picture of the reclining Buddha. We also visited the Grand Palace, which is in the upper left-hand corner of your screen here. Construction of the Grand Palace began in 1782, so it's been around for quite a while. And when you visit there, it's a huge tourist destination, so there's a lot of people and extensive ground. So this is kind of one of the main buildings there, but there are also a lot of other buildings and temples and Buddhas around the grounds to visit. So it's you know, quite an area to explore. The Grand Palace is an official and ceremonial place of residence for the monarchy. Now, while the king doesn't actually live there, it's sort of a ceremonial place, so they will have events, ceremonial events there for visiting dignitaries or for the royalty there. Wat Pho, as I mentioned, is the temple of the reclining Buddha, which is also located close to the Grand Palace. It stands 15 meters high and 46 meters long. You'll notice the feet here, which are made of mother of pearl on the soles. It's a pretty substantial Buddha that we visited, and you know, it's again a huge tourist attraction, you know, given its proximity to the Grand Palace. Now, a couple stories, you know, we're going to pepper some stories in here from our experiences there, but one story that we experienced and kind of learned the hard way was something that when you Google gemstone scam in Bangkok, you can learn more about it. But we actually got sucked into to one of these. We had taken a water taxi from our hotel to the area where the Grand Palace was going to be. We were at an ATM getting ready to get some cash and then head over with our map in hand over to the Grand Palace. A stranger came up to us and said, "Oh, you know, where are you visiting from?" You know, spoke perfect English, and you know, we told him we were visiting the Grand Palace, and he said, "Oh, you know, unfortunately it's closed." And at that time was the end of 2004. If you'll remember, the big tsunami had hit Southeast Asia, and he said the monks were praying for the tsunami victims, so the Grand Palace was closed. And we thought, oh, you know, great that somebody is telling us this, and we didn't waste our time going over there. So he said, you know, there's actually, let me look at your map. There's actually some other places that you should check out. Lots of other spectacular nearby temples that you might be interested in. So marked it on our map, flagged down a tuk-tuk driver and got us a discount on the tuk-tuk. And so we took off with this tuk-tuk driver to the first Buddha. And we get there, it's, you know, fairly empty, and run into somebody else, another person that spoke really good English. You know, he said he had been a monk before and studied in college in the US, and said, "Oh, where are you visiting?" And so we explained again what was going on, and he looked at our map and said, "Oh yeah, by the way, you know, you should check out this gem place. You know, there's if you like gems, go check this out." So of course, you know, we're you know, kind of just went along with it. Driver took us to another temple and then finally took us to this gem place. And as it turns out, the scam was what they try to do is get you to buy some gems. Typically, these gems are pretty worthless, and then have you ship them back. They might treat you to a dinner, maybe a Thai massage. And then before you know it, that you parted with your money, and the gems are no longer in your possession. So fortunately, we didn't buy any gems, but you know, obviously it did kill a few hours in our day when we could have been visiting the Grand Palace. So we decided, you know, we figured out what was up, made our way over to the Grand Palace, and sure enough, on the way there, we had 3 or 4 other people telling us that the Grand Palace was closed. Of course, by the time we got there, it was bustling, tons of people there, you know, obviously not closed. And so we learned our lesson. But just be aware, if you ever visit Bangkok, this is still a thing. And if you're curious about it, it is a pretty interesting and very consistent scam that goes on. Google gemstone scam and Bangkok. Next up is Borobudur. So this is a Buddhist temple in Yogyakarta, which is in central Java. This is the world's largest Buddhist temple. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It was built in the 8th and 9th century. So as you can see, it's quite massive. One of the opportunities when you visit Borobudur is to go there during sunrise. So it involved a very early, I think we left our hotel about 3:30 in the morning, trip from the hotel to the temple. But it is, frankly, it's pretty spectacular. So as the sun comes up, it's just super peaceful, very serene. You're just surrounded by these stupas on the temple itself, as well as the Buddhas. So within each of these, these little bell-shaped structures, there's a Buddha inside, and so a lot of historical significance. And as I was preparing for this presentation, one of the common themes that I recalled from learning about all these temples was that a lot of these places have both Buddhist and Hindu influence. So as time progresses, there's a certain religion in the region that is sort of has precedence and is stronger. And then as people kind of move in and move out, I would call it like a religious evolution occurs, where it shifts over, and then it goes from one religion to the other. And so a lot of these temples that we're going to talk about have actually influence from both the Buddhist side as well as the Hindu side. However, today, they are usually one or the other. So just kind of an interesting fact to keep in mind as we talk about these. Next up, within the same region is Prambanan. So Prambanan is actually a Hindu temple. It is located probably about a 45-minute to an hour drive away from Borobudur. It is also a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Construction started in the 8th century, completed in the mid-9th century. It is the largest Hindu temple site in Indonesia and one of the biggest in Southeast Asia. So originally there were 240 temples in the complex, but many have deteriorated or have been looted. So when we were there was actually an earthquake a few years before. And so it was still in, kind of being reconstructed. There were areas where you could see, piles of stone from the temple that they were in the process of kind of reconstructing. But needless to say, it was still pretty spectacular to go see. Next up, we're headed back to Jakarta. So in Jakarta, there's a large obelisk called the National Monument, or Monas for short. You can see it here. It is prominently visible from various vantage points within the city. It's about 132 meters tall, and it was built to commemorate the struggle for Indonesian independence. Construction began in 1961 and opened to the public in 1975. Also within Jakarta, and this is in the Menteng neighborhood, which is where my grandmother lives, is an urban park, a public park called Taman Suropati. So, Jakarta is a very urban area, but there are these pockets of public parks. So it was nice when we would stay out there to, I would go for a run or go for a walk over to the park and, just enjoy being outside. And typically it's pretty full with people. You'll see people walking around. There's even some stray chickens that I don't even know where they came from, but that happen to be wandering the park as well. Now over to Bali. So Bali is an island that's just to the east of Java, and Java is the island where Jakarta is located, as well as Yogyakarta. There are many temples there, and what's interesting, as I mentioned, Indonesia is a predominantly Muslim country. However, Bali is sort of an exception. They are predominantly Hindu island. So there are a lot of Hindu temples located in Bali, and one of the big tourist attractions there, as far as temples go, is a temple called Tanah Lot. So you'll see here, there's two different pictures, and what you'll notice is on the left is the temple during high tide, and then on the right, the temple during low tide. So there's a lot of ceremonies and stuff that happen here, but what's interesting is depending on when you go, you might have access to the base of the temple. Otherwise, if it's during high tide, then the temple is basically surrounded by water and is inaccessible without going through the water. Next up is Uluwatu Temple. So this is a Hindu temple that's built at the edge of a 70-meter high cliff. This is another popular tourist destination and a popular site for sunset. So, really able to capture some spectacular pictures when you go out there. Now, this brings me to another interesting story. So there were, when you go there, you'll notice there's a lot of monkeys that are kind of roaming around in the area. And there's an interesting issue that's unique to this particular temple. So we went with a guide. Our guide warned us before we got out of the car to hang on to your belongings. So your sunglasses, your eyeglasses, anything that's fairly light, because the monkeys will steal them. So Julie, as you can see, wears glasses. She had just, we had recently, probably a year or two before that, taken a trip to Argentina. She had some cool new frames from Buenos Aires. And so got out of the car and she was hanging on to her glasses. And she was happened to be walking behind me. I hear her scream behind me. A monkey jumped on her head, ripped the glasses off her face, and then took off. And so then it was like, okay, well, how do we get these glasses back? And if you remember we're up on a cliff. These monkeys are sitting on this cliff, and this monkey that had her glasses was just kind of gnawing away at the glasses. So then our guide called some people that were working there. There was a family of 4. They had these fanny packs with little snacks, and so called them over and asked if they could retrieve her glasses. So they were climbing out on the kind of on the ledge where the monkeys were sitting, and they had in their fanny packs, they had little snacks, so chips, cookies, etc. So they were tossing snacks back to the monkey with the glasses, and the monkey was just super interested in the glasses, took the snacks and basically whipped them back at the people. So no luck with that. Eventually, one of them climbed over, went over to the monkey, got the glasses back, and gave it to us. So, of course, we were thankful to get her glasses back, offered them some money, and basically was refused. They refused it and said, no, there's 4 of us. You need to multiply that money that you're giving me times 4. So, of course, we really had no choice if we wanted the glasses back, gave them the money. Turns out these monkeys are trained. So in Bali, you'll see these monkeys everywhere. This happens to be the only place on the island where the monkeys do this, where they steal things from people. And what happens is they were, presumably trained before, but then as new monkeys come, are born and, kind of hang out with the group, they learn this behavior, and it just gets kind of passed on from generation to generation. So if you ever go to Bali and you ever visit Uluwatu, hang on to your stuff. Next up is Angkor Wat. So as you saw in the Cambodian flag, it is a prominent symbol of Cambodia in Siem Reap. This is also a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and this is the largest religious structure in the world by land area, so over 400 acres. It was initially built in the first half of the 12th century as a Hindu temple dedicated to the god Vishnu, but gradually converted to Buddhist site towards the end of the 12th century. Here's a view of kind of the grounds of it, so you can see it is very massive. When we went there, it was March of 2013. Was it March? April of 2013, and it was incredibly hot. I mean, just the hottest weather we've probably ever experienced. But it was still a very cool experience to see this. What's interesting about this, so this particular area, you'll notice I've got a close up here of the wall, and so all along this wall, it's the temple walls are decorated with 1,200 square meters of carved bas reliefs of Hindu narratives. So during the Hindu time of the temple, people had carved out, basically stories. So if you go through and, we had our guide kind of telling us some of the stories. There's I think 7 different stories along this wall. So incredibly complex, incredibly detailed, and super interesting part of that visit. In that region is another temple called Ta Prohm. So this is, as you can see, it's got some trees that have overgrown the temple. It was mostly kept in the same condition it was found. This is also colloquially known as the Tomb Raider Temple. So Angelina Jolie was in the movie Tomb Raider, and they did a lot of scenes in this temple and utilized a lot of the background scenery for that movie. It is part of the ANGKOR complex, so located a short tuk-tuk ride from Angkor Wat, as well as Angkor Thom, which I'm going to talk about after this. It was built in the Bayon style in the 12th and early 13th centuries as a Mahayana Buddhist monastery. One interesting point in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a carving of a dinosaur. People aren't sure whether this was a more recent carving and done as a hoax, or if this is an actual dinosaur depiction from the time that this temple was originally created. But it's interesting to see that there is a actual dinosaur carving here. And different from a lot of the other temples where they've tried to reconstruct it and taken away the overgrowth. A lot of these temples, the ones that I mentioned in Indonesia, as well as these temples, they were built and then subsequently deserted and then just kind of overgrown over time and then rediscovered later on. Since these were built so long ago, there's a lot that happens to these. And so you'll see a lot of these temples that have been overtaken by, the local vegetation in the process. Next up is Angkor Thom. So Angkor Thom is an ancient city, about 10 square kilometers. The name means great city. It was the capital of Jayavarman VII's empire, and it was dedicated in the late 12th century. There's a Bayon temple at the center of Angkor Thom, which has the faces that you see here on this slide. There are 216 faces on this Bayon temple, and throughout the town, or throughout the city, you'll see both Hindu and Buddhist architectural influences. Next up, we're heading back to Jakarta, and here, as I mentioned, Indonesia has the largest Muslim population in the world. So 225 million Muslims that live within Indonesia, which is about 87% of the population, identifies as Muslim. So and this is the largest mosque in Southeast Asia, the Istiqlal Mosque, in the center of the picture here. You'll notice right across the street is a cathedral. This is the St. Mary of the Assumption Cathedral. This cathedral was consecrated in 1901, and there's actually a tunnel that's under construction now that'll connect the mosque with the church. Christianity, while the country of Indonesia is predominantly Muslim, the Christianity is actually Indonesia's second largest religion after Islam, making up about 10%. In Vietnam, one of the places that we visited were the Cu Chi tunnels. So in the Vietnam War, these tunnels were utilized by the Viet Cong. This is a network of connecting tunnels that were used during the Vietnam War. So the US and Allied forces sent tunnel rats in to infiltrate the tunnels. We got to see, and they actually dug out one of the tunnels for us to experience, but the tunnels are very small. So in order to be able to go through, you had to be very small as well. And so, they attempted to crawl through. In some cases, there might be dead ends that they would go to. They also tried to pour in water, gasoline, and fire in order to flush out the Viet Cong. In a lot of cases, the water, they had drainage systems designed to drain off anything that was poured in. So it was a way to defend against those attempts to flush them out. And the occupants within the tunnels, it was pretty oppressive. It was small tunnels, but they did set up areas where they could live and cook and sleep in the tunnels. And there were actually some pretty novel ventilation systems set up where the smoke from cooking would kind of gradually dissipate, and then they would set up kind of these fake ant hills or termite hills to let off some of that smoke. So it was interesting to see, and really helped us to understand kind of the challenges that were there for during the Vietnam War. Here you'll see a view on the left-hand side of one of the tunnels, and this is actually kind of dug out a little more. They were actually quite a bit smaller. And then they also built in booby traps. So this is just one example of one of those booby traps. So not only was there the challenge of trying to go through a small area, but also if you happen to go in the wrong place where there was a booby trap, you could get impaled and basically get stuck and die there. So again, a really challenging terrain.
Okay, so I'm going to chime in here, and we've gone back to Jakarta, and this is in the neighborhood of Menteng, which is where Dave's grandmother lives, as he mentioned. This is the state elementary school where Barack Obama attended. He was between 8 and 10. He attended school here from 1969 to 1971. So that was an interesting sight to see. And here's a picture of myself trying to imitate Obama. Okay, so one of the biggest ways or the best ways to get immersed into a culture is by sampling the local cuisine and trying foods that are indigenous to the region. So I'm going to be talking about exotic fruits, specifically fruits. One of the fruits that we tried it's called the mangosteen. A mangosteen is about 6 to 25 meters. It's in an evergreen tree, which mainly grows in Southeast Asia. It's the fruit is very sweet and tangy. It's filled with like nice fruity juices also, and it has a reddish purple color rind, and as you can see on each fruit, it looks like a little flower. So you can tell by if you count the number of petals, that is going to correlate with the number of segments that are in each lobe inside the fruit. So that's always a fun fact to know what you're getting. Next, durian. This is known as the king of fruits. It's distinctive for its very large size and strong odor. They're can be quite heavy and weigh up to 3 kilos, and they have a oblong to round shape. As you can see, they're like a greenish brown color. Some people regard durian as having a pleasantly sweet fragrance. Others find the aroma overpowering with a very unpleasant odor. Some often describe it as smelling like rotten onions, turpentine, or even raw sewage. You be the judge if you get to experience this.
Very acquired taste.
Okay, next is the rambutan. It's a medium-sized tropical tree named for the edible fruit, and this is closely related to other tropical fruits like the lychee and the longgong. The name rambutan is derived from a Malay Indonesian language for hair, as a reference to the numerous hairy little tentacles that are on the fruit. This has the taste of like a grape, a little bit of sweetness also. It's quite nice. I like it. Oh, and also these are available at Costco. We have some in our refrigerator right now.
We
So
just found some.
if you really want to try the rambutan, head over to Costco in Lakeview or Lincoln Park. Next is SALAK. This is also known as the snakeskin fruit. Reddish brown scaly skin, about the shape of a ripe fig. The fruit inside consists of 3 lobes with 2 larger ones and then a smaller one. It has an inedible seed in the middle. They have the size and consistency, the lobes of garlic. It doesn't taste like garlic. It's usually sweet and acidic. The best way I can describe it is that it tastes it's kind of like an apple mixed in with grapes. Okay, next is the carambola. This is also known as the star fruit. The cross section, when you cut it, very much resembles a star, hence its name. It has a very smooth skin and almost kind of waxy. It is sweet without being overwhelming. The taste is also difficult, or sorry, is compared to apple, pear, grape, and other citrus fruits. Next is the dragon fruit. It's actually much prettier than it tastes. The dragon fruit, it's pink and green. It grows almost kind of like a cactus and it only blooms at night. It has, like I said, a very mild taste. It doesn't taste bad. It's just very mild, almost kind of bland. But it is very pretty to look at. Next is the jackfruit. It is the largest tree-borne fruit in the world, reaching as much as 35 kilos in weight and up to 90 centimeters in length and 50 centimeters in diameter. It's a very thick and hard skin. The pieces that when you take them out have they're yellow and long, and they have more of a taste of a sweet, fruity aroma. And it also has the kind of a strong aroma described as pineapple or banana.
So next up are restaurants. Obviously, as Julie mentioned, food is a primary. You can learn a lot about a culture through their food, and there were a lot of great opportunities restaurant-wise for us to explore. We're just going to highlight a few of them here. So first is Mosaic. This is a restaurant in the Ubud region, which is up in the mountains of Bali. This is at the extreme end of the spectrum as far as fine dining goes. This is one of those places that has a distinct tasting menu. When we were there was one menu that was kind of more geared towards Indonesian, another that was kind of more geared towards Western, and we actually sat outside. So this is kind of the setting that we were sitting in. It was phenomenal meal. It was a really great experience. And here's a few pictures of the different courses we had. So it was one of those long meals where you just get multiple courses out and really got to enjoy and savor, as they incorporated a lot of the the fruits that Julie talked about, as well as the local cuisine. Another restaurant in Bali is called Merah Putih. So Merah in Indonesian means red, Putih means white, and this corresponds with the colors of the Indonesian flag. It's a red bar on top, white bar on the bottom. This place has traditional and modern Indonesian cuisine, but really what's the food is phenomenal, but really what's also striking about this place is the architecture. We had a chance on one of our visits to talk to one of the general managers of the restaurant. He explained, as you can see in this picture here, these columns actually collect water. So as it rains outside, it collects the water in here and funnels it down to the plants and the vegetation that's within the restaurant. So all of this is, living vegetation, and it really provides a, just a beautiful atmosphere within the restaurant itself as well. Kind of a different place that we went to was in Bangkok, a place called Bed Supper Club. When you approach it from the outside, it kind of looks like a spaceship that landed within the area. And the concept here was kind of a clubby place, for drinks and dinner. But basically, you're eating in bed. So they had, these beds that you can sit in, and they would serve you dinner there. And actually, for being such a, for the concept and everything, you don't expect the food to be that great, but it was actually really, really enjoyable. We went here a couple times, but it was a unique place, something different to check out. Back over to Bali, in the Seminyak area, is a beach club called Potato Head. This is a great place to, just kind of go and lounge. So, grab a spot either on the beach or grab a table in the restaurant and, just hang out, relax, have some drinks, some beachside cuisine. So great area to relax, a great place to relax in Bali. Ibu Oka is known for what's called babi guling, which is suckling pig. They basically roast a pig over a spit and serve that until they run out. So it's important to get here early. They have several locations. This is actually the location we went to, and you'll notice shoes down here. So as you come in, there are low tables within the restaurant. You sit down on the floor, they serve you here. And it's a pretty basic meal of rice, a little side, and then some pork. So that, along with a beer, I believe was like $5. So very inexpensive meal, very filling, and just very delicious. Next up is something called rice tafel. So this is a Dutch term, translates to rice table. Back in the colonial days, this was a way for the Dutch in the area to kind of bring back the riches from Indonesia and kind of show off all the dishes that were available to them. So typically what you'll see is a variety of dishes. So multiple courses. These could be dishes from different areas within Indonesia, and it really helps to just kind of highlight the variety and the complexity of the cuisine from Indonesia. There were a couple places that we went to experience rice tafel. First was a place called Oasis. You'll notice there are different staff members that come, different servers that come, each one bearing a different dish. And so it was a very elaborate process where they would come, you take a little bit off of each plate and, really kind of collect your meal. You'll see here that we were also serenaded during dinner. So, it's a very elaborate process and, a fun experience to have. On our last visit, we went to another place that also served rice tafel. This was, they did a presentation where they brought out the meal and then portioned it out before we as we sat down. So another opportunity there. Another way to experience the cuisine is through street food. And this is not unlike, in the US where we've got food trucks, or, you go to New York, there's a hot dog cart, similar type of concept, but now this is the food that's indigenous to the areas that we were in. So just a few examples here. One is in Singapore. There are multiple areas called hawker centers. So the way they acquired this name was the people that go out and kind of push those carts, they're known as hawkers. And so Singapore is very strict with how they handle everything. And so one of the things they wanted to do was kind of to provide a place for the hawkers to come together instead of having them just scattered out in the streets. they're actually able to rent space within these hawker centers. So these are, you can think of these as open air street food centers. There are more than 100 throughout Singapore. So, basically you can, anywhere you go, you can probably find one. There's typically seating. So it's a matter of just walking up, finding what you want to eat, grab it, and then having a seat. And it's a way for Singaporeans to get together and socialize. So it's a very central piece of the culture. There's even a hawker stall with a Michelin star, believe it or not. So there's a hawker called Hawker Chan. He has the record for the cheapest Michelin starred meal. His signature Hong Kong style chicken and rice dish is sold for about $3 Singapore. So if you make your way to Singapore, be sure to hit this. We haven't been there since he got his Michelin star, so I definitely will be visiting there next time we go back. The largest is the Chinatown market with about 700 stalls. And what's interesting about Singapore is it's a mix of cultures. So there's the Chinese, the Malay, the Indians, and the Eurasians. So you'll see different regions of the city where there's higher concentrations of these different cultural groups. And then you also see it in the cuisine, a different mix of all these different cultures. Singapore hawker culture was recently added to UNESCO's list of intangible cultural heritage in December of 2020. So another fun, interesting fact. Another street food is satay. So, this is basically skewered meat on a stick. So this is, ubiquitous to Indonesia. You can find it anywhere. In Thailand, one of our favorites was the mango sticky rice. You can actually find this at a lot of Thai places here in the US. It's a mix of sticky rice, coconut milk, and mango, and it's pretty delicious. Also pretty common nowadays in the US is pho. This is a Vietnamese dish of broth, rice noodles, various kinds of meat, and then basil and bean sprouts. Are really delicious and pretty easy to find nowadays as well. One of my favorites was a dish I found in northern Thailand when we were in Chiang Mai called khao soi. It's a mix of deep fried crispy egg noodles as well as boiled egg noodles, pickled mustard greens, shallots, lime, ground chilies, meat, and I've seen it with chicken, and then a curry-like sauce with coconut. It's a delicious mix. I've found a few places here in Chicago that sell khao soi. It's not as common, but this is a dish that is from the northern Thailand region. In Indonesia, kind of similar to the last couple of dishes, is a dish called baso. Baso is meatballs. And when you refer to baso, it's typically the meatballs mixed with noodles and broth. So you'll see a lot of stalls around, people with carts selling this as well. And then one of the things that we hadn't experienced until our first trip to Bangkok was something called myang kam. This is a snack food, which is also from northern Thailand. When we had it, it was something called betel leaves. So the betel leaves, you can see here in the picture, serve as kind of the vehicle for the fillings. These little fillings in the little dishes typically include shallots, chili peppers, ginger, garlic, lime, and the lime still has the rind on it, roasted coconut, chopped peanuts or cashews, small dried shrimp, and then a palm or sugarcane syrup that has been cooked with lemongrass, galangal, ginger, and fish sauce. So that gets poured on top. And it's literally like a taste explosion in your mouth. So Thai food is very much a mixing of the different, sweet, sour, spicy, etc. So this just really concentrates all of that into a single bite. It is really delicious. I think we did find one place here in Chicago that had this after we returned back, but this is not a common dish that we've been able to find. Next up are markets and street vendors. This is a picture here of Julie when we were at BOROBUDUR. Street vendors can on occasion, depending on where you're at, be very aggressive. This is especially seen in Indonesia. Typically, you're able to bargain. So, don't ever, just go with the first price that they give you. See if they'll take less. And it's sort of it's like a sport to them. So, you just kind of go back and forth until you hit that spot. They'll usually act mad and then just pretend like make you feel like you're getting it for a steal. But funny story related to this. There was one time I was in Indonesia. There was this carved chess set that I was interested in. So I asked the vendor, and we were actually getting in the car, getting ready to leave, asked him how much it was. And I think he had quoted, basically the equivalent of like $50 US. And I'm like, no, I'm not interested. So then he basically started bargaining with himself. So he was talking himself down. At a certain point, he got down to about $20. And I said, oh, okay, I'll take it. And then he stopped himself and he said, no, wait. And then he went back up. And I said, no, you said, $20. And so finally he's like, okay, fine. He gave it to me. So, that was an example of where he got so aggressive that he actually outbargained himself. Jalan Surabaya is a well-known street in Menteng in Jakarta, actually right around the corner from my grandmother's house. This area is known for antiques. They have a lot of antiques that you can buy, and again, some very intense bargaining that happens there. When we were in Bangkok, we had the opportunity on a couple occasions to visit the CHATUCHAK weekend market. So this is made up of over 15,000 stalls and 11,000 vendors. Basically anything you can think of to buy, for better or for worse, you can find at this market. It is the world's largest and most diverse weekend market with over 200,000 visitors every weekend. We also visited some food markets. This tied in with my next topic that I'm going to talk about, which are cooking classes. So before our cooking classes, we would visit some of these food markets. It was a way to kind of see, think of it as like a farmer's market on steroids. But basically people go and do their produce and food shopping there. This was a food market we went to in Phuket in Thailand. Also, when I did the cooking class in Bali, this was the food market in Ubud. So next up are cooking classes. This is another great way to experience the culture, experience the cuisine, and also have something to bring back with you. So, when you reminisce about your trip to certain regions, this is a great way to kind of recreate that experience that you had. So first up was a Balinese cooking class that we took together. And, I typically do most of the cooking in our household.
All of the cooking.
So Julie is usually not with me, but I managed to talk her into joining me for this cooking class. So this was a fun experience that we both got to do together. We also did a cooking class in Cambodia. So this was at the hotel that we were staying at in Siem Reap. We had a Thai cooking class in Phuket. Each of us got our own little cooking stations here. And then finally another cooking class in Bali. Next topic are natural disasters. So, obviously going on a trip, you have to be aware of kind of what you're going into. Certain regions are known for certain things, and, keeping track of, kind of what's going on in the world is always important. One of the things that's, this region is known for is being part of what's called the Ring of Fire. So you can see on this map here, the outline of the Ring of Fire. It's a horseshoe-shaped area that includes Indonesia, includes the Philippines. You see it takes up Japan, New Zealand down here, and then the west coast of the US, of North America, as well as the west coast of South America. This Ring of Fire is, it encircles the Pacific Basin. It's made up of a string of volcanoes and seismic activity. So 90% of all earthquakes that occur along the Ring of Fire. And this is dotted with 75% of all the active volcanoes on Earth. There are a string of 452 volcanoes that stretch from the southern tip of South America, up the coast of the Americas, across the Bering Strait, down through Japan and into New Zealand. This picture here is actually a volcano, an active volcano in near Yogyakarta. Within Indonesia, there are many volcanoes where you can go and visit. In 2006, there was as I mentioned earlier, there was actually an earthquake in Yogyakarta. It caused some pretty significant damage to Prambanan, as I mentioned earlier. But amazingly, Borobudur actually remained intact. As I also mentioned earlier, our first trip together to the region also coincided with the tsunami that hit on December 26, 2004. So as we were getting ready to leave the next day, I was up making final preparations for our trip, and then saw in the news that a tsunami had hit. And at that point, we didn't really have a good sense of the magnitude of what the tsunami was going to do as far as damage went. But this tsunami, was concentrated in that region. It was at the northern tip of Sumatra, where a tsunami was triggered by a magnitude 9.1 earthquake off that northern coast. The tsunami killed about 230,000 people, with Indonesia, Sri Lanka, India, and Thailand bearing the brunt of the tsunami's force. The estimated deaths from the 2004 disaster in Indonesia alone was around 170,000. And with that tsunami, it kind of kicked off the Indian Ocean Tsunami Warning System. So that was formed in early 2005 in response to that. This is a picture of one of the headlines. So we were in Singapore during that first week, and every day we would get the Straits Times at our door, at our hotel door, and it would show the increasing death toll that was a result of this. So it was kind of a sobering event to go through. Fortunately, and I'll show you here on the next slide, the areas that we were headed to were not affected. So, Singapore is at the southern tip of the Malay Peninsula, which is right here. The earthquake happened up here on the northwest corner of Sumatra. And then we also went to Bangkok, which is in this little bay here in Thailand. So both of these areas were shielded from the devastation that happened from this earthquake, from this tsunami. You can see these areas in red outline the coastline that were severely hit by the tsunami. On another one of our trips, this happened to coincide with the H1N1 influenza outbreak in 2009. So this was the first influenza pandemic to happen in decades up until that point. It was declared, the pandemic was declared by the World Health Organization in 2009, and then declared over in August of 2019. So it originated from animal influenza viruses and is unrelated to the H1N1 viruses that are in general circulation. So it basically jumped species over to people and then spread very easily between people. This particular virus was a disproportionate disease among children and young adults. And so that was kind of the alarming part. It was high morbidity, so it spread very easily, but low mortality. When we were on our way to Indonesia, we had a layover in Tokyo, and before we were allowed to get off of the plane for our layover, we were all required to wear masks. And then they provided an information sheet explaining what was going on. We actually had required to go through a health screening. So before we could deplane, this is a little video of people from Japan that were checking temperatures of all the people on the plane. If you had an elevated temperature, you were segregated from the rest of the group and potentially isolated if you were found to be sick. But this was something that little did we know was kind of a precursor to what we're all going through today. And just for comparison, so on the left-hand side is H1N1 versus COVID-19. So kind of percentage of deaths. We've got much higher death rate with COVID-19 versus H1N1. And, with H1N1, when we went to Bali, they had screened cameras, thermal cameras that would check people's temperatures as you were coming off the plane and entering the airport, and presumably stopping people that they found to have elevated temperatures. So, just when this whole pandemic that we're going through now was starting up, it just kind of brought me back to all of that. And you'll see that 94 to 98% of the H1N1 cases were mild or asymptomatic versus only 80% of COVID-19. Just for comparison, so nearly all countries reported cases of H1N1 with more than 17,000 documented deaths worldwide. In the US, there were 59 million clinical illnesses of H1N1, 265,000 hospitalizations, and 12,000 deaths. Now, these were reported cases, and deaths they estimated were likely underreported because they didn't, they didn't necessarily test everybody that died. They estimate that the deaths were probably closer worldwide to about 284,000 deaths for H1N1. So pretty significant, but just for comparison, COVID-19 to date is 213 million cases and 4.44 million deaths. So, this is obviously something very significant that we're going through. Next up is culture. So I'm going to hand it back to Julie.
So I'm going to talk about batik. Batik is beautiful. Batik is basically, it's a method of dyeing material, usually cotton, in which pattern areas are covered with wax so they don't absorb the color. They have gorgeous materials. Anytime we're in Indonesia, we always stop in at a batik store just to even look at the material.
Another kind of interesting part of culture is the different modes of transportation you find. So here's just a few examples. These are not as common anymore. This was in Yogyakarta, but this is called a becak or a pedicab. Basically, it's a bike with a couple seats on the front. We also had bajais, which are these motorized three-wheeled little vehicles. In Thailand, these were called tuk-tuks. So they're pretty common around Thailand. Thailand also had these trucks down here called song tiaos. And you can think of these, kind of a parallel that we have today are the when you do an Uber or Lyft and you do a shared ride. These are basically shared rides. So you jump in the back, tell them your destination, and then in the meantime, as they're approaching your destination, they're dropping off people, kind of getting on and off as they go on. So this was common over there as well. And then also riverboats. So, as I mentioned in Bangkok, we had that river outside of our hotel. This was a common way to get around. Now in Vietnam, one of the things that struck us was the just the number of mopeds and these little some motorcycles that were around. It was intimidating because sometimes you had to cross the street, and Julie asked me, well, how are we going to get across? And so we had to kind of observe, but this was an interesting little video I found showing what the process is. I found this on YouTube. It kind of shows what this looks like. So you can see there's just a mass of people, and it seems almost impossible to be able to cross. So what you have to do is basically just start walking. So what you don't want to do is be unpredictable. Don't make any sudden moves. Just slow and steady, cross the street. People will go around you. So you just walk. There's people turning. Just head down, keep walking. Don't get scared. but it is first time you're out there, first time you experience it, it is pure chaos. So just an interesting thing to keep in mind if you ever visit.
Dave told me, close your eyes and don't stop.
Yeah.
So that's what I did.
So I just grabbed her arm. We walked slow and steady across the street. The way we picked up on it, we saw an elderly woman out there, and I'm like, well, she's not getting run over. She's just kind of doing her thing, walking across the street with her groceries, and she was fine. So we just followed suit. The last thing to talk about are the people. So, obviously there's tons of opportunity to interact with locals. The area where we were staying in Cambodia offered us an opportunity to visit a couple of villages in the area. The children there were super friendly, just really wanted to interact with us, and likewise across the rest of Asia as well. There's ample opportunity. You'll find that people are extremely friendly. And it's just always fun to get to know people and just kind of learn about culture through meeting people. In closing, these were some of our favorite things on visiting Southeast Asia. Hopefully, this provided you a flavor of what we experienced, and hopefully provided some inspiration to get some of you to go out there. I would say a lot of our experience centered around food. So food is obviously a great thing to experience out there, and then just experiencing the unique aspects of Southeast Asia. And Julie, I don't know if you have anything to add, given that this was kind of new for you when we first went out there.
Yeah, it's the scenery is absolutely beautiful, and there was something there for everyone. So you can't go there and have a bad time. So
thanks for your time, and we'll take any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dave and Julie. That was fantastic. I might have you unshare your screen for the Q&A section, because we do have a few questions from our audience. But if anybody has more questions, please feel free to still put those in the Q&A section. Let's get started though. All right, here's our first one. During your many travels to Southeast Asia, what would you say is your favorite destination in this area?
Say that again.
During your many travels to Southeast Asia, what would you say is your favorite destination in this area?
That's a tough one. I mean, it's kind of like my attitude towards all the places that we visited. There's different favorites for different reasons. So there's certainly new experiences that we have on our travels, and we've gone to other areas besides Southeast Asia. So it's always fun to to try different things, and there's always something new, so something that's unexpected that we experience that maybe we weren't planning for, that ends up being a favorite. So I'd say what was awe-inspiring was visiting those temples though. So just kind of learning about the history, just getting the background. You see pictures of these places, and you don't appreciate it till you're there, and then you really kind of hear the background of it.
And I just to chime in, I think of all the places that we visited, the kindest, nicest people were in Cambodia by far.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And is it possible to fully unshare your screen so we can just be, it's like we're in person.
Yeah, oh, there we go. Is that better?
I think it's still there. If you go up to the top, there's the green panel, and then to the right of that, there's a red button.
Stop share. There we go. Sorry.
No. How are the fruits eaten? Just like an apple or an orange, or are they cooked, or parts of a baked dessert?
Those are all peeled, first of all, and you don't eat any of the skin on any of the fruits that we talked about.
But they're all eaten raw.
They're all raw.
So like the snakeskin fruit, it's it's peeling it off, grabbing out the lobes, cutting them up. The rambutan that we got from Costco, you just, basically poke into it and just peel it back. Trying to think. Yeah, I think most of them, is there anything that you eat the skin? I think all of them you have to kind of peel that skin back, but and it depends on the fruit. Some you could eat raw, or you might incorporate it into certain dishes. So there's a mix, but it was always fun, depending on where you go. And for breakfast they'll usually have some various fruits out, so it was always kind of fun to try, like, okay, what's that? I wonder what that tastes like.
Yeah. Is your background a picture that you took?
Yeah, so this is a picture from Yogyakarta. We happened upon this this farm. So there's a farmer here with his oxen pulling a plow. So I thought that was kind of a neat picture.
Yeah. Is it expensive to travel to this area?
It depends when you go. There's there's high season and low season. It is pretty intense as far as getting out there. So obviously you're flying halfway around the world. I would say, flying to Indonesia, total flight time, without counting stops, is probably about 20 hours. So you factor in, you've got to, you can't just fly there straight. You've got to stop in a spot. You're there for at least a couple hours and then fly again. So it's exhausting. If you have the means and you have maybe some frequent flyer points to cash in, I would recommend trying to go, business class. If you can, get some good sleep, it'll help you kind of get up and going right away versus having to get to your destination and then just, recoup from the flight. But there are deals to be found for sure. So, there's lots of people on lots of different budgets that get out there.
Yeah. In Borobudur, is there any significance of the Buddhas, with some having bell shapes and others not having those bell shapes?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it had to do with maybe some of them were just missing the tops, because it seemed like originally they all intentionally had the bell-shaped tops on top of them. I think through the course of time, maybe through earthquakes and stuff, some of them might have gotten damaged or destroyed.
Yeah. All right, so I'm scrolling through our questions. We still have questions, but there are an overwhelming amount of thank yous for a very interesting, impressive, and informative presentation. So there you go. Is safety a concern at all when traveling to this area?
Yeah, I mean, I would say in general, you want to do your research ahead of time, just to know what safety issues there might be. I think for the most part, it's not unsafe. There's maybe some petty theft. So, it's important to be aware of where your wallet is and where you keep everything. Don't wear anything too flashy. You don't want to be targeted. But compared to other areas that we've been to, I think generally pretty safe, right?
Yeah. Also, go to a travel clinic before you go to these places. You're likely going to need a vaccine that you haven't heard of, or get prescription medication for if you get upset stomach, food poisoning, things like that. So that's one thing I definitely do before any trip.
Food poisoning can ruin a trip, and we obviously recommended a lot of different things, especially street food. So you just got to be smart about what is riskier to eat versus other things. But having antibiotics on hand, which a travel clinic will provide, will be helpful in the event that you do develop food poisoning, and you can kind of cut it off before it gets too severe.
Yeah. That was actually one of our questions, and it was asked by my dad because he gets sick anytime we go on vacation.
Oh, you should go to the traveler's clinic.
What's the best time of year to visit?
So Indonesia has a rainy season and a dry season. And, when I was younger, I always thought the dry season would be better, but it's actually really hot during the dry season. What's nice about the rainy season is it rains, it kind of cools things down, and then it stops. I always imagined, as a kid, you don't like the rain, and I always imagined it would rain all the time. But actually, the rainy season is better. And I can't remember. You probably have to look it up when that coincides on the calendar. But being especially down in that area, being a tropical area, it is.
It's always hot.
It's very hot.
And then when we were in Cambodia in April, I asked them, I said, when is the hottest time to be here? They said, right now. Yeah. It was extremely oppressive, the heat in Cambodia in April. Yeah. So try to not go in April.
we also visited China during that time. So that's why, if it was just Cambodia, we probably would have picked a better time to go. But it made it a little emptier, so it wasn't that crowded.
You mentioned the mixture of Hindu and Buddhist cultures in several areas. Did you sense any antagonism or a peaceful coexistence, or simply just tolerance in their interactions?
It was pretty peaceful. I mean, we hear a lot of things in the news about certain religious groups or whatever, and from our experience, just going to these different countries, I mean, what you see on the news is always very different than what you actually experience, because, this is like day-to-day life. And, people, I think just in general around the world, we all just want to get along. And so, there was always that peaceful coexistence, I would say, and, I think, those two religions especially tend to be, pretty peace loving in general anyway. So.
How often did you take tuk-tuks?
In Thailand, fairly frequently. There was actually a really nice elevated train called the Sky Train that very modern in Bangkok. So we would take that. There's various, I didn't talk about them, but various markets that go on every day, all day, every day around Bangkok. But tuk-tuks are a cheap and easy way to get around. It just kind of depends, if you want to save some money, tuk-tuks are a great way, but there's certainly other modes of transportation as well.
Awesome. We are down to our last two questions, so savor them. When traveling in 2004 after the tsunami, were there times when you thought that you should not have traveled there?
When right before we left, I had a lot of coworkers, Julie's dad actually, they heard about the tsunami and they were worried for our safety. But, looking at the map, I knew where we were headed to was actually going to be okay. And we actually weren't planning to spend any time on the beach. So, and knowing what I know now, and back then it was more, kind of just educating myself about tsunamis, but knowing what I know now, I think
we wouldn't have gone.
We would have been fine. Well, it depends where it was hitting. If we were going to an area where the tsunami had actually hit, then yeah, it definitely would have changed our plans.
All right. Any recommendations on where in Southeast Asia to travel in the next year? And do you have any upcoming travel plans?
Well, unfortunately, I don't know when this pandemic is going to end anytime soon. One of the things to keep track of is, with everyone trying to get immunized and with these different variants kind of spreading around the world, things can change. So, this is a trip that you kind of have to plan, well ahead of time. But at the same time, things are changing so fast that it's hard to predict what's going to happen. If everything was, was kind of back to normal, I think it just kind of depends what type of travel you like to do. If it's more urban travel, Bangkok is a super cool city to go visit. If you like visiting historical sites, temples and that sort of thing, Cambodia was really cool to see. The temples in Indonesia were really cool to see as well. Singapore actually is a great starting point. So for Julie, that was actually the first place she went to in Southeast Asia. And because it's so westernized, it's less of a culture shock to go there, to start there, because it's so westernized. They've got you know, kind of the colonial area, the Indian area, the Chinese area, and people there speak English. So you know, if you're depending on your sense of adventure, you know, Singapore might be a good place to start as well. It's very clean. You know, they have very high standards as far as health goes. So Singapore would be a great place to start.
Well, Dave and Julie, thank you so much for your time and for your fabulous presentation.